Kevin Mercer is our next speaker. Kevin is Executive Director and co-founder of Riverside's Stewardship Alliance, an organization which develops programs and educational products and advances policy that preserves, protects, and restores rivers. Kevin Mercer.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the organizers. This is a wonderful event, and I'm very pleased to be asked to speak here. We formed Riversides about 15 years ago because the Task Force to Bring Back the Dawn, an honorable institution in its own right, decided that they would prefer to put more energy into the development of wetlands than water quality. Water quality is one of those issues that we have a tendency to skip over in the City of Toronto, and primarily to try and hide as much as possible, to think that we don't have to actually make progress on. I don't know if you know this, but the City of Toronto constantly discharges raw, untreated sewage into its rivers every time it rains. We have a situation where we turn our backs on our rivers because we refuse to accept the responsibility for what we've done to degrade them. So consequently, in other cities in North America that we think we are much greener than, they have signs that actually say, our combined sewer system discharges untreated sanitary sewage to this river at this point, please stay away, this is dangerous to your health. In Toronto, our signs say, caution, waters rise quickly. So, I spent a lot of time putting together a slideshow, and I think it's because I have slideshow-itis. I do a lot of conferences, and I really realize that what I can do is probably talk to you more effectively without it, but I'm just going to run through it. What the report said, we have raw sewage in our rivers. Next slide. What the report said is stormwater, more or less, is creating green sewers out of our rivers. I want you to pause and think about that for a moment. Here's a stat for you. It used to take a week for a watershed to drain. It now takes 24 hours. All the water that gets into the Don River, the Humber River, the Mimico, and all the other creeks and rivers in the Toronto region comes off, by and large, the 70% of our city that is hard-surfaced and unable to infiltrate water. That has the effect of transporting large quantities of pollutants immediately to our watersheds. What have we done in the City of Toronto? What is the Toronto Environmental Plan asked to do? It asked that we pass a wet weather master plan. We worked for years on the wet weather master plan, and we are still in the process of working on it. Its implementation is a 25-year time window. In that meantime, what we have done is we have taken the solution of building large containment vessels to capture the combined sewer overflow and put them in at the waterfront so that we have pristine beaches while everything up watershed winds up being consistently and constantly degraded. It is time for the City of Toronto to move on to a practice of undertaking what we know of as low-impact development. This is the practice of actually redesigning our city so that water is treated as a resource instead of something that we hate. And the way that we can do this, first and foremost, for all of the city councillors who are out there who have a chill about tax issues, who have an issue with spending money, the only way that we are going to achieve the restoration of our watersheds, the cleanliness of our beaches, is to make sure that people have an understanding that the responsibility for cleaning up our rivers begins where rain falls, and that is at the individual property level. And as many other cities have done in Europe and the United States, the answer lies in establishing a stormwater utility that creates for the city a funding mechanism, a regulatory mechanism, and a practical solutions mechanism that addresses for each individual property, kind of like the Provincial Clean Water Act is supposedly trying to do around drinking water protection, by means of saying, you take responsibility for the quality of the water that flows off your property in terms of the volume and the quality. And when you do that, we will either charge you or fee bait you the cost of what you are generating for the public good from your property. So consequently, the Smart Growth Plan for Southern Ontario, next slide, says that we are going to have to make significant changes to the way we design our cities. Next slide. So this is what we have mostly, and this is what results from it. Does anybody know what this is? This is Finch Avenue. This is August 19th, 2005. This is the result of watershed development where we put in lots and lots of houses, where we decide that the best way to dispose of stormwater is to make sure that it gets into a pipe and gets into a river as fast as entirely possible. Well, this is Little Black Creek, and Little Black Creek ain't so little anymore suddenly, and it caused $34 million of damage in a 12-hour period. Next slide. This is the flood that occurred at the same time as the Walkerton disaster happened. Slide. What we have is a pollutant-based regime, much like we have in a lot of instances. We are ignorant of the pollutants that we constantly throw into our rivers. Road salts, sediment, everything from washing your car in your driveway. We pave over our city where we shouldn't. Next slide. We are losing the habitat, we are losing the biodiversity of our city. What Toronto needs is low-impact development. What we got is the Western Beaches Storage Tunnel and a bunch of stormwater ponds that masquerade as habitat. It's a bit slow. Okay. We want to protect the natural hydrologic function of our rivers. I think in Toronto, we have a tendency to believe that we have achieved the greening of our rivers because we plant a lot of trees. All that means is that we've got a lot of trees around very degraded watersheds. So here are the 5 steps. Create soft surfaces to infiltrate water, hold it back by minimizing the demand, and put in place those necessary individual actions at the individual property level that make a difference. So, rain barrels. We have a City of Toronto rain barrel program that doesn't actually meet the objectives of protecting our rivers. We don't actually design our cities appropriately, and we don't have enough of a practice of infiltration in the city. This is a long list of things that you can do. If you need to know more about it, I gave Chris Chopnick a fine postcard called The Homeowner's Guide to Rainfall, which every city councillor who's interested in this issue should read. It's a website that we developed with the assistance of the City of Toronto. Next slide. This is the rain barrel that the City of Toronto used to give its residents, but after amalgamation took away from them and replaced with a much less sizable rain barrel to make a difference. This is rain harvesting. Here's some quick facts. 20% of the world's energy is used to pump water. In the City of Toronto, 57% of the energy used by the corporate City of Toronto goes to pumping clean water to your house and the sewage from your house back to the sewage treatment plant and back out to the lake. We're encouraging the City of Toronto to implement mandatory stormwater rain harvesting and to get the province of Ontario to change the building code to allow you to flush your toilet with other than drinking water. There is enough stormwater that comes off your roof of an average house to flush your toilet 21,000 times a year. Next slide. I'm not going to belabor the fact that Toronto has a lot of work to do. What we do have is a history of having done the right thing. We had a downspout disconnection program in the early 90s. That program hasn't grown, hasn't changed. We have been resting on our laurels. It's time we actually began to take comprehensive, positive action that will really make a difference. That difference begins with you and I at the individual property level where we live, work, and play. Thank you. Do your part.
Thank you, Kevin.